Hey guys, and welcome to another video. Today we're discussing the Guardians of the Galaxy game that was announced at Square Enix Presents yesterday, and kind of really taking in what the game could be, where it could go, and kind of just reveling in this new announcement from Square Enix. So without further ado guys, let's get into it. So to begin with, I do want to say that I am quietly optimistic about this game. I think there's two things that we have to keep in mind when looking at Guardians of the Galaxy, and that is not to compare it to Avengers, because it is a single-player, story-driven game that is a one and done, whereas Avengers is a game as service and online and dealing with many multiple characters that you play, whereas this game is obviously a single-player Star-Lord experience with Guardians as an ensemble cast around that. I think that's the first thing to remember. I think it's also to remember that everything that we see or have seen up to this point is obviously development footage, graphically and even, performance-wise. Those things will change and obviously evolve. We do, after all, have 4 months before the game actually launches, and a lot of the work that goes around graphics and optimization is typically done nearer the end of a project than at the beginning. So we should not judge anything that we've seen so far too heavily, but obviously it does give an indication as to where we're going. So I want to kind of break this down into 3 parts, as I normally do, and talk about story, then graphics, and then what combat, gameplay, performance, that sort of stuff looks like. So story-wise, we don't have many details right now. We do know that the game is going to be set about a year after the Guardians have come together. They're going to set off a chain of events that means that they have to save the galaxy from something that they unleashed. We know that we will have a number of villains that show up during the game, and we know that these villains will be both well-known villains and some more deep cuts. We also know that we'll have the same in regard to supporting characters. Mantis shows up in the trailer, for example, and then oppositely Cosmo the dog also shows up, which is a little bit more of a deep cut. It was a reference in one of the Guardians movies, I believe, but it wasn't something that was kind of more full-fledged like it seems to be in this game. The story, I imagine, is going to be very much a one that kind of shifts somewhat depending on the options you make. What we saw during the gameplay, what you're probably seeing now as you're watching this, is that Star-Lord has options to kind of lead the team. The idea is that you're making the shots in these situations and you decide how it goes. One of the choices being that you can decide whether to sell Rocket or Groot to one of the antagonists to get a payment before rescuing them. And obviously, I imagine, depending on who you choose, that mission will play out quite differently. So we don't know quite how strong the decision-making is yet. I hope that it's enough, but I got very reminiscent vibes of the Telltale Guardians of the Galaxy game. It looks very similar in terms of how it works. All I hope for is that it has enough of a sprawling set of options and consequences for those options that replayability doesn't feel like a chore. That is always something that you want in these types of games, where you can go in and have a good guy Star-Lord run, a bad guy Star-Lord run, and kind of like a middle kind of run. And I think as long as there's enough variety to allow for something like 3 separate runs that would be kind of not so identical, I think that's pretty good, pretty fair. But yeah, it's really fun to see that. It's really exciting to see this kind of story that's largely unpredictable. It could be anything, we could see anything happen. I think that's very much on brand for Guardians, and hopefully that plays out in the game and the dialogue options. Now, graphically speaking, I think the game can be slightly hit and miss in places. Visually, in terms of the environments and the enemies we see, it's very well done. I do think the characters themselves still need some work. Again, obviously we could be seeing that before the game even launches, but I do think Gamora especially needs a bit of work. Her hair is very static, and there's something kind of about her proportions that seems slightly off. There is a bit of an uncanny valley thing with these characters as well. Star-Lord suffers slightly from it, but at the same time I very much like their designs. I think their clothing, their kind of character identity has been very well preserved, but equally well changed to fit this story they're telling, to fit this universe they're telling it in. And I'm very happy to see that. I love the fact that they're also adding skins, but that they're all going to be there on day one. There will be no DLC for this game. They imply that the game should be complete on shipping, and I concur. I think it's great to have a few extra skins that obviously are incentivizing you buying the deluxe edition, or in fact pre-ordering, and those skins being a little bit of a fun add-on. But I think aside from that, I think generally speaking, if you want to bring out a single player game, you should, for the most part, unless you're adding a big content drop, keep everything within the first drop of the game itself. Some of those skins will be MCU related, some of those will be more comic inspired, and some of them seem to be originals for the game itself. So that's really cool. Obviously these skins aren't just for Star-Lord as well. You do get skins for the other characters, so you can dress up your party however you want, even if you can't play as them. So that'll probably keep some people happy, even if they can't play as Drax the Destroyer. Now, talking about gameplay, I think this game looks quite interesting. What I would liken it to so far is Final Fantasy 15. It seems very much like you're controlling Star-Lord, and then you're calling your other members to assist you. And that seems to work. You get these kind of really cool combo moments. You get Rocket to go in there and blast people. You get Groot to go in and use his vines to hold people. And so there's a little bit of strategy in there. There's a little bit of a thought process, and there's combos to be made there as well. We see also a lot of environmental stuff as well. These enemies that the group are facing seem to be able to freeze people. So I can only imagine that there is stuff like shock damage and gravitational damage, similar to Marvel's Avengers, but obviously tailored to this game. Equally, we also see what seems to be kind of a charge meter and an ultimate meter. During the gameplay, Star-Lord invokes this, and this cinematic plays, and as he does this, music starts to boom. You get kind of become almost like hypercharged, it seems, and that looks really fun. That looks really interesting. I think there's a lot to kind of say for very straightforward, basic kind of combat design of, hey, he has two guns, this guy has two guns, he has rocket boots, he has his friends that can call on, and he has the ability to kind of go a bit nuts. I think going beyond that really is unnecessary for a game like this, and I hope they kind of keep it fun but simplistic. I don't think it needs to be overly complex, even if you've got these kind of theory crafting moments of like, hey, let's use Groot and then Rocket, for example. Overall, guys, I do think that this game looks to be shaping up to be something very interesting, something that you should keep your eye on. I'm not necessarily saying this is an instant buy. I think it's a little bit away from that at the moment, but I think it's something that everyone should keep an open mind about. I think a lot of people right now are likening it to Avengers. In fact, we've been told that it is distinct and standalone, and that it has nothing to do with the Avengers game. So I think we should look at this fresh, we should look at this with new eyes. Oftentimes we've had games brought out by the same producers but different studios, and even though they've been dealing with the same properties, they've actually wildly varied in terms of quality, and I think that could be the case here. The Avengers does have content drought issues and such like that. Obviously that won't be an issue that Guardians of the Galaxy has, because it's not that type of game. So yeah, I think the sins of the father are not the sin of the son in this kind of case, and they should be totally separate, and you shouldn't try to compare them, apart from the fact that they're Marvel. Now, of course, guys, I will be covering Guardians of the Galaxy when it launches October 26th this year, so if you guys are looking forward to it or want to see more about the game, please consider subscribing, and whilst you're there, share and like the video. Thank you guys as always, and I'll see you in the next one.